You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Tim and I, everybody here at Bloomberg, we talk a lot about data. We talk about bias in data. And our next guest thinks a lot about how your unconscious bias is affecting how you interact with your colleagues. According to this woman, she is an award-winning diversity consultant and international corporate speaker. Her bio notes she is diversity personified. She's a CEO, an entrepreneur. She's Black, she's a female, she's bisexual. She's an ex-preacher's wife, left-handed, and a former Division I athlete. So she looks at life from a lot of different vantage points. Curious to see what she says about our diverse and yet divided atmosphere. So welcome to Risha Grant. She's CEO of her own firm, a speaking and consulting firm, Risha Grant LLC. She's worked with the likes of Google, Levi, Xerox, YouTube, P&G, Samsung, Harvard, and parts of the U.S. military. And she too has a book on this subject, Better Than Your BS, How Radical Acceptance Empowers Authenticity and Creates a Workplace Culture of Inclusion. She is with Tim and me on Zoom from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Risha, really delighted to have you here with us, and no doubt about it, your background really caught our attention. Talk to us a little bit about yourself and how your diverse background and looking at the world from a lot of different points shapes your thoughts about diversity and inclusion.
Definitely. Well, first and foremost, thanks so much for having me. This is a topic that's been near and dear to my heart my entire life. You know, growing up in Oklahoma, it's not a place where diversity is celebrated in the way that it should be. And so I don't think that I chose it. I really think that it chose me. You know, from the time I was a kid, this is something that I have cared deeply about. And I'm really frustrated with where we are now in the world, because I believe that we are, you know, we're prioritizing politics over people. And that's really, really all diversity and inclusion is about.
What do you mean when you say that we're prioritizing politics over people right now? What are some examples of that?
I think you see it in all of the election stuff that's about to start happening for 2024. I think when you look at the LGBT plus community, a lot of bills, like over 400 or 500 bills, have been introduced, right, to really stop the growth of that community. And I feel like it's something that is being used as fear. You know, it's being used. People are prioritizing LGBT over family values. And, you know, it's really, and especially when you drill down into transgender, it is really something that is getting teeth right now, when really we're just talking about humanity. You know, that's the whole thing about this, is we are talking about humanity. We're talking about allowing people to just be who they are.
I am curious.
If you look,
I'm curious about who you are and where you have felt the most stop signs or pushback. Was it as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, being Black, being a female, being bisexual, being an athlete, where I feel like there are still so many gaps between women athletes and male athletes in our world? Where have you, and forgive me that I'm like, what's the worst experience? But I am curious where you have felt so much pushback as, you know, being in one of those worlds or environments, if you will.
It's definitely, for me, it's been being Black, you know, and again, growing up in Oklahoma, you know, I come from a state where when we would read about in high school, for instance, we would read about Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, all those things, and, you know, they use the N-word in this in those books. And instead of, you know, really talking about or saying, we're not going to say that word, the Black kids would go out in the hall, you know. And I remember even thinking then, like, wow, this is, you know, this is crazy. It was never the concept of, let's not say this, let's talk about why this is a problem. And then as I got older, I still had to, you know, I still had to experience being Black, like being bisexual, being a woman. All of those things may have played a part in it. But I know for me, I've had many instances where just being a Black person has kept me from doing some of the things that I wanted to do in life. And so what I realized about myself is that I developed a bias toward white people. And that was something that was the game changer for me. And because when I started this business, I started the only diversity communications firm in the state of Oklahoma. And when I tell you, it was the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. It was insane. And I would get so much pushback. And in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, it's because, it's because I'm Black. It's because white people don't want to hear this. They don't care about this. But when I realized that, you know what, you're carrying the same bias in to your meetings and in your interactions that you're probably receiving. So for me, it all starts with the person, and I knew that I needed to recognize how my bias was showing up in my behavior. And so when I began to change that and I began to really just look at people for who they are, I noticed a big difference, not only in myself, but in the people around me.
So Risha, so I am curious, like when you go into, or Google hires you or wants to work with you, Levi's or P&G or the U.S. military, like when you go into, and I'm sure it's not all the same situations, but I am curious, what are you brought in to do? And what is it that's like top of mind, or their concerns, their worries, that they want you to help them with?
It is really about, because for companies, discrimination lawsuits are still one of the number one lawsuits that companies face. And for them, if their culture is not connected, they don't have cohesion, then, goals aren't being met. People aren't happy. You have to keep replacing people. So most of the companies, they want to make people aware of their biases, their unconscious biases, and how they're showing up toward their coworkers. And so for me, I help them to identify, own, and confront those issues. Because a lot of people still say, well, I don't have bias. But I like to use this audience engagement tool, and it's completely anonymous. So when I ask people what their biases are, it is ridiculous. Black people, white people, homeless people, overweight people, people with money. It's like, we don't like anybody. We have an issue with everybody. And so I tell people all the time, like, every white person is not racist. Every Black person is not to be feared. Every homeless person is not just lazy. We have to deal with the person in front of us instead of looping them into a group of people that may have offended you in the past, because that's what happens. We have an interaction. It can be a bad interaction, or we're living through the pains and experiences of the people who raised us. Right. So they tell us things about people, and we carry that for the rest of our lives. We never even give people the chance. And, and I try to tell people, I tell companies all the time, you don't have diversity problems, you have people problems. Diversity is not a problem. Diversity is a fact.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Because a couple of years ago, I would say in 2020, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, a company started to talk about this in a different way. But I don't know if they continued to talk about it. I don't know if that kind of went away a little bit.
It's gone away a lot.
Yes, I agree. Yes.
What are you seeing in your work?
Oh, this year has been the most challenging, really, since I started speaking. I've been doing this 25 years, so way before it was cool. And when I started, it was more apathy. People just kind of, they didn't get it. Now it's like people get it, and they get it in a way that scares them. So if I'm being honest with you, like one of the things, the main things that's come out of this year is DEI fatigue. And I said, okay, please explain that to me. Well, our employees are tired of hearing about DEI. Can we talk about it from a culture standpoint and not say the words DEI? Well, that's what was happening, 20 years ago. And the thing is, people may be tired of hearing it, but think about the people that are tired of living in it. And they're tired of dealing with it. And so you've probably seen the numbers where, I think it's 50% of DEI directors or some really big number like that have lost their jobs.
Wow.
Because companies they're pulling back. And the thing is, you cannot pull back on people.
Right.
And the absolute biggest fear that I get when I really get a chance to talk to my audience is that white people they fear that this is going to pull them out. Right. This is going to exclude them. And any company that's doing inclusion right, it's about everybody. It's not about pulling people out. It's about bringing everybody in.
Right.
That's the problem, is we've been pulling people out.
You talked about diversity officers. We did a story earlier this year in February. Hiring for diversity officers stalls 2 years after big promises. So it does feel like quite a change. Listen, we've run out of time, but I hope we can continue this conversation in the future, because you really have made me certainly think about it. The idea of it's not a diversity issue, it's a people issue, I think is just a big theme and a big way to think about this. Be well, and hopefully we'll have you back soon. Risha Grant, CEO of our own firm, author of Better Than Your BS. Check it out, everybody.